with President Trump backtracking over his collusion claims. Think about it like this. If you can remember Monday, this week began with a hearing on the Mueller report with experts discussing the criminal evidence against the president and how prosecutors carefully analyzed issues of collusion, which Donald Trump has long denied. That was the beginning of the week. Tonight, Friday, the week ends with President Trump literally going from no collusion to pro-collusion. Something so controversial, so rebuked, and yes, so obviously illegal as a claim of something you want to do, that even he has found himself spinning to backtrack. Check out the new interview on Fox News.
First of all, I don't think anybody would present me with anything bad because they know how much I love this country. Nobody's going to present me with anything bad. Number two, if I was, and of course you have to look at it because if you don't look at it, you're not going to know if it's bad. How are you going to know if it's bad? But of course you give it to the FBI or report it to the Attorney General or somebody like that.
He loves America so much, don't worry. Now, Donald Trump may wrap himself up in the flag, literally. But the larger context here has to do with his actions, not just his blundering interviews. Remember, Bob Mueller did determine there were multiple links between the Trump campaign and Russia. He did probe this as a criminal matter, and in some instances, the campaign was found to be receptive to at least potential collusion, offers of help, attempted collusion, whatever you want to call it. Now you have Donald Trump saying basically to the world they'd be receptive again. Oops, I did it again. His campaign saying they have a new kind of made-up policy. They will review these foreign offers of dirt on a case-by-case basis. This is real life. So the idea there would be the campaign will check out the offer of a foreign dirt. They will look at it case by case and then go from there. Now, Donald Trump's comments on collusion did go further than what we've seen thus far. His aides, though, have given other types of hints.
Would you call the FBI if it happened again?
I don't know. It's hard to do hypotheticals, but the reality is that we were not given anything that was salacious.
There's nothing wrong with taking information from Russians. Any candidate in the whole world, in America, would take information negative
from a foreign source? From a hostile foreign source?
Who says it's even illegal?
Who says it's even illegal? The law, the FBI, the Mueller report, independent legal experts, prosecutors, all other election experts, and while we're counting, the person currently in charge of elections in the United States, the chair of the Federal Election Commission.
There seemed to be a little bit of confusion on this point, which confused me because it's actually a matter of black letter law. It's pretty straightforward. Anyone in the United States is not allowed to accept anything of value from a foreign national, particularly a foreign government, in connection with an election.
I am joined by David Rothkopf, a former editor of Foreign Policy and an aide in the Clinton administration, and the author of Traitor, the Case Against Donald Trump. Sam Seder, host of The Majority Report, and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, who, as I mentioned, recently testified to the Congress on the related issues in Obstruction Volume 2. When you look at this, and you look at a week that began with Donald Trump, if nothing else, caring about message and trying to get away and out from the hearing that you did participate in, and you shared your views and your expertise, what does it mean that he then brought up Volume 1 and would appear, do you think, to offer at least part of the type of intent that he had spent 2 years disclaiming?
You know, the president could have made my Monday a lot easier if he would have just made these statements over the weekend. Because on Monday, Republican congressmen wanted to ask us, me and the other witnesses, well, you know, what do you say now? You used to say that there was collusion, and now you're saying, now Bob Mueller has said that there isn't. What do you say? And of course, we had to explain to them that what Mueller found was that there was not a formal conspiracy. The president didn't enter into an agreement with the Russians where they set out to achieve a purpose together. But there was a lot of evidence in the Mueller report that there was the collusion that existed. Mueller's problem was often with proving intent. It looks like this week the president completed that loop pretty clearly, at least saying, looking forward, that he would be willing to take something of value, a donation from a foreign government.
Well, you know, I think the president and the White House are treating it like it was a gaffe, and I think a lot of people covering it are treating it like it was a gaffe. But it's not a gaffe. It's actually part of a 3-year approach to dealing with these things. We saw it in the Mueller report, revealed incidents. But right now, not only has the president said this, but the Attorney General of the United States is undertaking an investigation of the investigators. Imagine somebody went to the FBI now and handed over a piece of information. And those people in the FBI know that the last time that happened, those people ended up under investigation. At the same time, the Senate Majority Leader is quashing efforts to fund protections against this kind of investigation. And yesterday in the United States Senate, you had a Republican Senator, Marsha Blackburn, stand up and say, no, let's not move ahead with a resolution that said simply that if you're approached by a foreign government, you have to report it to the FBI.
So you're making a really important distinction here, which is this is not a gaffe, although Trump is trying best case to call it that and move on. This is an admission.
It's an admission. It's a kind of a policy of their approach. They did it during the election. He reached out to the Russians. He took their information. There were scores of meetings. He defended the Russians. He obstructed. And he then rewarded the Russians with policy. He's continued with that. And now we are coming up on 2020. And it's not just him. It's not just his attorney general. It's not just the Senate Majority Leader. It's the Republican majority in the Senate and all of his aides.
Sam, that's very well put. Sam, listen to more of the damage control interview, which, again, people say, some people, cynics I hear sometimes say, well, nothing matters and they get away with everything and we all just move on. No, a lot of things matter. A lot of people who didn't belong in government, according to the facts and ethics, were removed from government. The president is under pressure from his own party. It matters. So this is what it looks like. He goes on Fox. This is the damage control. Take a look.
What if that person, if a leader leaned over and just said, listen, this candidate that you're running against, he did some dicey things in XYZ country, and I got some proof of it. What do you do in that scenario? Do you back off? Do you say, I don't need it? Do you say, show it to me?
I hear things that, frankly, good, bad, or indifferent, that other people don't hear. Just a normal conversation. Right. But nobody is going to say bad things to me. They know that I'm a very straight player.
Well, I mean, look, I read his comments on Monday, or I should say I heard his comments as being just a statement of his policy, more or less an invitation. If anybody else has got anything for 2020, bring it in. I'm not going to scare anybody off. But I agree with you. I think he's worried about this. You don't spend a half an hour on Fox and Friends calling in when you're the president because you're not worried about where you are with this stuff. I think for whatever reason, they feel in the White House that this stuff is seeping out outside of their bubble.
It's going well outside of where he controls a certain crowd that are very loyal, that'll believe anything. It's going to the rest of the country. It gets in the territory of why does the sitting president want to collude and say collusion is okay with foreign powers that, you don't have to be an expert on this, aren't working for us. They don't have our interests in mind. I think it cuts very deep. You don't need to be a political expert. You don't need to be obsessed with the Mueller probe, which is over. It cuts deep. It also, I want to mention for your analysis, goes to what it means when the president is subjected to journalistic interviews. Because we're going towards 2020. He's relaunching his actual formal 2020 campaign next week with a speech and all that. And ABC was a part of that. And credit, they happen to be, competitors, but credit to the ABC journalist, Mr. Stephanopoulos, who conducted just a journalistic interview that brought out material from the president.
I mean, when was the last time that he sat down with a non-Fox, non-friendly journalist? I feel like it's probably been years.
So it's months for print because he's talked to the New York Times. Right. The television is different. The ability of Stephanopoulos or any interviewer to see on camera and press the president, that hasn't happened in I think, well over 6 months when we checked. And also then there's the historical part of this, which is this talking point that appears to be dying. Sometimes you just see a talking point die during the week that, oh, well, who really knows how to deal with this and what would really happen? And we actually had the Al Gore aide who called the FBI like you're supposed to on this story. Take a look.
We turned it over immediately. He eventually turned it over to the FBI. They came and interviewed me that day.
They came out and saw you how soon?
That afternoon.
Same day?
For 4 hours.
So your reaction as a campaign operative was, this might be criminal because it could be stolen at a minimum to help another side. And you call the authorities, and their reaction is, this is important. They come out same day.
Correct.
So when a presidential campaign got something that might have been dirt, stolen, didn't even know whether it was foreign, FBI and the FBI comes in same day because it's a real crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this also has to do with, I think, their concern that talking about collusion, getting collusion back in the news again, is going to put pressure on Democrats to start to support impeachment. We're seeing polling now where people's desire for impeachment inquiry is starting to rise, and I think that's what is going on with the White House. They just don't like the idea, and why would they? The idea floating out there that they're okay with collusion, because that builds a certain amount of political pressure to investigate what happened in 2016.
So that raises a really good point. Why would you ever, as a president, get here where you're essentially saying collusion is okay and I'll do it in 2020? And I think the only reason you do that is when you realize you can no longer defend the position that you didn't engage in collusion. This has become widespread. People understand increasingly the facts in the Mueller report, although the country still hasn't read it. This president engaged in collusion. The only way he can look forward is by saying, and it was okay.
Well, I think there's another reason, and that is he's open to it. You know, this is just part of the way he wants to do it. You know, you mentioned George Stephanopoulos. It wasn't a particularly tricky question. He wasn't, you know, playing some journalistic mind game with the president. He asked him a simple question, and the president said, yeah, I'd collude. And the reason is he would. And the reason, and we've seen it happen in the past. What I would suggest that we do, though, is recognize that when this happened 3 years ago, and we're coming up on the anniversary of the Trump Tower meeting, the 3rd anniversary of that, and the president's speeches on this thing, that's what we saw. We saw a speech where he said, you know, come on, Russians, if you've got the emails, let's have them.
Now, this is a serious topic, but how nerdy are we that we're marking the 3rd anniversary of the meeting?
We're pretty nerdy. I'll speak for myself.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, no, not you, Joyce. But the reality is that behind the scenes, there was a lot going on.
Right.
You know, the president said one thing, but there were hundreds of meetings behind the scenes. So if this is his position, this is his policy, this is what he's saying now to the camera, what's going on behind the camera?
What's going on behind the scenes and what's going on around the world? This is the serious part, which you've studied, where you have governments and foreign intelligence services that are constantly trying to mess with us, to create fake information, to trick us. And now they've got what appears to be a whole new pipeline to do that. Well, you mentioned the pressure on impeachment. I do want to show where this is going. Speaker Pelosi's made it pretty clear this is not what she's leaning into. But the pressure is building not just from the grassroots, not just from some of the 2020 candidates. There really is more of an establishment wing as well that's saying, so what? So Trump gets away with all this? And obviously I mentioned Joyce is at the hearing where there was a lot of discussion of that. Look at Brian Fallon, who's a Justice Department former official who worked for Hillary Clinton. He said, I used to think Trump could shoot a man on Fifth Ave. Republicans would let him get away with it. Now I think the Democrats would too.
Well, I think Democrats are frightened right now. You talk about the polls. There seems to be some thought within the Democratic Party that moving towards impeachment has a negative effect. There's no evidence that I've seen to support that at all. And in fact, what we know from the Nixon era is that once the impeachment inquiry started, actually support for it built, because the case is being made. The case is being made on television and publicly. And I think gradually those Democrats are going to have to get over this and move forward with impeachment, not just because it's politically the right thing to do, but because constitutionally it's the only thing to do.
I think at the beginning of the week also started off with that question about the census. And I think to a large extent, you know, having Barr and Wilbur Ross refused to come testify, and the president attempt to exert executive privilege on stuff that happened during the transition when he was not president, mind you. I think that's another element. I mean, I think it's just building. And frankly,
well, to be fair, it might qualify under non-executive privilege. Executive privilege joke.
There you go.
Count it up.
Not nerdy at all. But I also, I mean, I think, you know, the other part of that ledger is not just what happens if you impeach. The other part of that ledger is what's the cost if you don't? Because, you know, the Democrats have passed about 55 bills since they took the House. There's not a lot of stuff left for them to do, frankly. And something's going to happen between now and the election. And if it's not, if the Democrats aren't taking that space, you can be sure that the Trump administration will.
It's very interesting, and I think there are tells here, and one of the tells is the White House is actually seriously worried about this. Politically, if not substantively, we've heard tonight from our experts about why both are significant. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.